Let's see here. Yeah. All right. Looks like we are live now. Roll that a little. All right. If you are in the live stream and you can hear me, please let me know in the comments. See if we can. Let's see. Hey there, Steel City Caprice. Got me. Cool. Awesome. Appreciate that, guys. It's always kind of weird setting these things up, and I just don't want to get to a point where I'm talking for 20 minutes, and all of a sudden I look at the comments and people have bailed out, or I can't hear a word you're saying. All right, sorry. I am not the most technologically advanced guy out there, but whatever. All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. I thought about doing this as just a regular video, as a recap, of the flat tappet cam series. But you know what? I just thought, what the heck? It's easier to do a live stream than all the editing. And I figured, what the heck? Give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions you wanted to ask, and we could just kind of go from there. I've got, muscle cam solutions. Yeah, that's kind of funny. So I figured I'd just try to answer some questions, kind of summarize everything. This has been a weird topic. I knew it was going to be a little spicy, but man, the amount of hate that people throw at it, and I get it. If you've had a failure, you're probably irritated by it, but it's I get it. I understand, but I also have to be a little protective of of the comments and the channel and all that, just simply because the YouTube is very picky about those kind of things, and threats of violence is one that they don't like. Obviously, I don't really take anything too personal, but it's kind of a weird thing. So anyway, YouTube also hides a lot of comments with 4-letter words or weird stuff in it. So anyway, but I wanted to talk about some of these little details individually, because I think there's been not some misconception, but I think there's still some misunderstanding in all of it. And really what it boils down to is, this isn't the one comment that I get very frequently is, well, 30 years ago, we never did any of this stuff. And while I don't disagree with part of that, we absolutely went through and break-in, back in the, late 70s, when I was watching my dad and my uncles doing it. And then, in the 80s, when I was a young kid, doing it for the first time with my dad, we always broke in valve train. Didn't always break in piston rings, but in a drag car, that's a little difficult. You can't really do that easy. So it's always been a little bit of a weird topic. So I get it, I understand, but we can't go back 30 years ago. We're living in today, and today we have to take care of these a little bit differently, because there's some things that have changed. And we're going to talk about all those today, but everybody seems to say it's the lifters and the cam, they're all made in China now, and it's all junk, and they're using cheap material, and the investment companies that own those, the cam casting companies and the lifter companies that actually manufacture these, are just cheapening it out and going overseas. and there is some of that. There is definitely some of that. If you look at any of the house brand names from some of the major retailers, there's probably quite a bit of that. that comes from offshore. But oddly enough, I've seen enough of those to know that a lot of what they do in the Camcore side is ground by those same companies that provides Howard's and Crower and Comp their camcores. And Summit's not grinding their own camshafts, but the company that casts those cores, because they're an tier one OE supplier, will grind them for them. So they're not made in China. They're still made in Michigan like everything else. So it's kind of a weird deal. I've asked this multiple times in some other conversations that I have, that, okay, there's a bunch of lifters on the bench here that obviously failed. Tell me which one of these were made in China. You can't. There's no way to tell which one came from China. And I can tell you that, knowing what all of these were, none of these are Chinese made lifters. These are all from American made companies or American camshaft and lifter companies that are buying the lifters from a US supplier. They're buying the cam cores from a US supplier. So there is some of it that's coming from offshore. When you find a really, 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 really cheap set of anything, you got to question it. We've talked about the Edelbrock carburetors that are all over eBay, and Amazon for, brand new 600 CFM carburetors for $198. Well, when the real one costs 450, you got to kind of wonder where it comes from. And it's no surprise where it actually comes from. So it's some of those things. So if you ever see a cam and lifter set that's like $50, $75 for a set of cam and lifters in today's economy with inflation and everything, yeah, you can probably guess that it's probably coming from an offshore supplier. But I can tell you that most of the retailers out there today, other than a few of the other, like I said, the the cheapy, house brand type stuff, that you can probably question. So that's just one thing. But again, we're going to talk about a lot of little things. But we'll just try to stick to as many of the details, because I want to cover one, kind of consolidated everything we talked about in the last 3 videos of this series, where we talked about why cams are failing, where we talked about the hardness, and then we talked specifically about lifters, because there's really 4 or 5 things that you can really do to really help this situation out. So we're going to first talk about springs. Now, these are garbage springs. So typically when I pick up a valve spring or touch a valve spring, I have gloves on. Every video I've ever done on valve springs, but these are junk. The reason why you don't touch valve springs with your hands is because they will rust. They will pick up some surface garbage, and you do not want to handle valve springs with your bare hands. Always use gloves. Always, always, always. A good engine builder will always do that. So, but these are junk, and I've got no no qualms about picking them up, because they're never going in anything anymore. So, I'm going to try to keep an eye on the comments too, because I did mention that I was going to be answering questions, and that's what I wanted to do on this video or this live is, if you got questions, definitely ask them. So I will try to keep an eye on it. Best way to test out, yeah. The problem with that is, you know, um, I know you're being kind of funny there, but you can do hardness fairly easily. But I wish there was a magic gun we could shoot at all this stuff and go, up, that spring clearly came from China. It's crap. That lifter right there came from China. But it is neither here nor there. But the comment's funny, so I'm in a good mood tonight, even though I feel horrible. I think I got a cold coming on or something, or maybe it's pretend COVID or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, so we're gonna definitely talk about the DLC lifter. I've got a few of them back here. Uh, so give me a few minutes and we'll talk about that, Troy, because certainly when I started this video back in January of this year, the DLCs had only been out for 4 months, 3 months, something like that. We've got a whole year with those now, and the feedback from users and people that have have actually used those things is pretty remarkable. I was going to grab some screenshots from a guy on Instagram. I'm sorry if you're watching and I forgot your name, but he was real concerned about it because it showed some really weird wear patterns, and the lifter didn't show any wear pattern at all on it. Well, that's good. That DLC coating, that's what it's designed to do. It's diamond like carbon is what DLC is. But we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Let's get through the spring stuff really quick since I've already kind of started on it, and I will come back to your question, Troy. Yeah, for sure. I can tell you that talking to the folks at Comp at SEMA, it sounds like that they are ready to move forward with the 904 lifter for the Mopar, the small block Ford, and I think the big block Ford are the three that are next. Don't hold me to that because I can't speak for them, but it sounded like they were really close to getting them done. So they got to go through a lot of testing, and obviously they're being very careful with it because the DLC coating on a lifter isn't new. That's not the first time those were done, but it's certainly certainly something that they have to be really, really careful with, because when you're such a big company like Comp is, and you do, I don't know, I would say probably, I can't even guess, but they are easily you could probably take all of the other flat tappet camshaft manufacturers and combine their sales, and they don't even come close to what Comp sells. So when you have that much volume going out the door, you're going to get more failures just simply because of that. So, who's producing reliable hydraulic flat tappet cams and lifters? Well, we're going to cover some of that, because here's the thing about that. Leonardi and Comp and Crane have all been ground in the same facility in Memphis for Crane at least 15 years, maybe longer. Leonardi for at least 10 whenever Holly sold them and got out of it. Leonardi moved back to the Memphis area. So, but it's all relevant to some of the things we're talking about. So let's talk about springs first. And then I'll try to answer your question as we kind of go along there, Steel City Caprice, because it's a little complicated, but it's a good question, and it's the common one that everybody has. So springs, I believe that one of the top reasons why flat tappet cam fails is because of the springs. Now, I'm going to get a catalog out here. I guess I probably should have moved all this crap out of the way, because I want to talk about this a little bit, because when we talk about springs, we're going to talk about pressures. So let's take one of my favorites here, Big Block Chevrolet. Obviously, I'm more of a Chevy guy than anything, but I don't really I don't discriminate against any of them. I would be happy as heck to have a Windsor motor, and I would certainly build a 340 or a 440 Mopar, no problem. When you talk about springs, so one question that seems to come up over and over and over again is, I bought the cam, I bought the springs that they told me they were supposed to go with it, and it failed. So it's the cam's fault, it's the spring's fault, it's the lifter's fault, whatever. No. And here's the reason why with that. When you talk about break-in pressures on a cam, in today's world, with the situation that we have today, you have to keep the spring pressures low. And when I say low, I usually like to see about 100 on the seat, which meaning the valve's closed, the valve is all the way completely closed. There's 100 pounds of pressure on the seat. When it's over the nose of the cam, when it's over the lobe of the cam, okay, I guess you can kind of see that. When it's valve is fully opened, I don't want to see any more than around 200 pounds of pressure over the nose. Okay. If you keep those two things in mind, now let's take a look at the camshaft here. So I'm going to take one that's fairly popular, the Thumper series from Comp. I just grabbed this. We could do this with literally any of them. I'll even go through other examples if you guys want. Let's take a look at the kind of the middle of the range one, 235, 249 on a 107 LSA. That's a pretty healthy thumper type cam. You're going to need a little bit of a stall, whatever. Now, it calls for a 924-16 spring. I don't know if you can see that, but you'll have to just take my word. It says 924-16. So let's go take a look at the 924-16. Okay, that is a dual valve spring. All right. Now, if we go down here and we look at the specs on that 924, where did it go? All right, seat load. That means on the seat, that 924 is at 112. Hopefully you can see that. It gives you the installed height at 1'900". Okay. That is okay. 112, it's a little excessive, but it's a big, heavy valve train. I get it. Here's what kills it. The cams never fail on the base circle. You look at the base circle, the small side of the camshaft here. You got the lobe here, right? This one's rounded off. But you got the cam here, lobe here. They always will fail on the highest pressure side. They never fail on the base circle of the cam. Okay, it's always where the pressure is the highest. Over the nose, that 924 is going to shock you a little bit. That 924 open load is 355 at 1'200". Installed height's important, obviously, because we'll talk about that in a quick second. But on the seat, 112. Open is 355. Now, that's a big block Chevy. There's some other cams that are a little lighter than that, the less on the RPM side, 220, 205, 210, 215 on the exhaust, 215, 220 on the on the exhaust, and 204, 205, 210 on the intake. That's a pretty mild, good street cam. It's a good torque cam, an RV cam, if you will, in a roller anyway, but doesn't really matter that way. The pressures are going to be less on that because that cam is a little bit more aggressive. You need more pressure. That 355 will wipe that cam out. I don't care what else you did to it. You could be running the right oil. You could have a match set of cam and lifters. Everything else could be right. But if you get these wrong, and this is, I think, the hardest part about building an engine these days, is if you get the spring pressure incorrectly, you are going to drop that cam. The chances of it doing that go way, way up. And I see that over and over and over again. If you look at any of the comments on any of these videos I did, and somebody says, well, I had a low naughty cam and I wiped out 2 of them. My first question is usually, tell me what spring pressure you broke it in at. Well, I don't know. Is the springs that came with the kit. It was the ones that they were told I was run. Yes, these are for after break-in, after initial break-in, after your extended break-in to finish off the rings and everything else. The spring pressures cannot be what the cam needs when it is done fully broken in. It has to be lighter. That is a huge, huge part of the failures. Most of the time, almost 100% of the time, people will go, yeah, you know what? It was 275 open and, 105 or 110 on the seat. Well, that's probably a big reason why. Springs is probably the number one thing that I think, because it's the hardest thing to do. Now, this is a triple spring. You see there's the inner, there's the band on the inside. It's very easy to break these apart, to take the inner out and take the band out and just run the outer spring and use that for the initial break-in and use it for the initial 400 to 500 miles, whatever your ring manufacturer tells you need to be at. That's key. You take that extra pressure out of it, now it'll drop that down. And your machinist can tell you by giving you the installed height, by checking the spring and telling you what that pressure is. If it's down around 200 with those out, perfect. If you have to switch springs to use a lighter spring, super, super, super critical. And what a pain in the butt to do that. If the heads are on the engine, if no one wants to change springs when the heads are on there, you either have to take the heads off or you have to lean over the fender with a, funky tool and all the other things to get the springs on and off a cylinder head. It's not fun. It's not easy. It's not general maintenance that most people can do. So I believe springs is always going to be near the top of the list of the reason why cams fail. So I don't think any of these are, if you said give me the top 5 and go from 5 up to 1, springs have got to be 1 or 2. I firmly believe that because of those spring pressures that it sees over the nose, and the fact that nobody is willing to do that. And the machinist doesn't really, I think in this day and age, they probably are talking about it more, but for the most part, people don't even think that. If they send those heads off to the machine shop to have the springs put in, valve got done, guides done, heads decked, cleaned up, whatever it is you're doing to them, the last thing that they ask the machinist is, oh, by the way, what's the pressures on those? I'm gonna do a break-in on a flat Tappet cam. They'll know that by the spring that you're using, but springs are a big one. So I wanted to talk about that. One last little thing here, because I think it's interesting to look at the installed height. I mentioned that a minute ago. Let's take a look at that 924 again. Now, I hope you can see this. I'll look at the comments here in just a second. That's a double spring. Inch 900 is the installed height, okay? Inch or 924, sorry. Then it gives you the outer spring rate, all those other things. If you go down here to spring height and you look at that inch 900 installed height, it'll tell you it's 112. Remember, we looked back at the cam specs on the cam a minute ago, and on the spring, it told us it was 110. What did we say it was on over the nose? Inch 200. Go down here to inch 200, cruise over here. It tells you it's 355. Now, let's take a look at some of this other installed height. Let's say you can get your machinist to install those at inch 800. The pressure changes, okay? Now you're at 147. That's not much of a change in the installed height, but because the spring is compressed down more, you are certainly opening that up to a heck of a lot more. Let's go up. Inch 900. Let's go inch 950. On the seat, it's at 95. Now, we talked about that. I wanted it around 100. That's a good number to be at. Let's talk about on the open pressure. Let's say we're at an inch 200 and we're at 355. Let's say we're at an inch 400. I guess that's probably a good one because it's a big swing. 285. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. I would not run that, but it's a heck of a lot better than 355. So installed height has a big part of how much pressure is seen on the nose and on the seat of the valve. Make sense? And that's what I love about, cam companies that have these type of resources, because you don't need to be a machinist. You don't need to be that guy or girl that's putting these things together and doing all of it. But if you can look at it and you know the standard of what the best practice is for it, you can at least look at it and say, hey, Mr. Machinist doing my cylinder heads, can we install those at inch 950 and drop the seat pressure to under 100? It'll help my break-in survive. They'll tell you if you can or can't, depending on piston to valve clearance, push rod length, all those other things, what lash you're going to set it at, all very critical. If there's a cup on there, all those things are going to change what the installed height are. But knowing at least that there's different values that you can get to. Now that's on the double spring. That's on the full. Now this isn't the 924 spring, but we'll just pretend that it is. But then you can start talking about with your machinist, hey, it's a double spring. Can I remove the inner out of there? And what will that be? I want to try to get to that 200 over the nose, over the top, to kind of keep my flat tappet. They'll work with you. They're happy to do that because they don't want to see you again, other than to see you come in with another motor and go, hey, that was awesome. So anyway, I wanted to talk about that because I thought that was very, very, very important to hit first. Because I would say if you were going to make me rank them, it's in the top two. So, all right, let me check the comments. I'm sorry I rambled on for a long time, but I wanted to get through that because I think it's very, very, very critical to understand that. And again, you don't have to be the one doing it, but you're the one that has to ask the questions, and you're the one that's going to pay for it if it's not. So, it's good things to ask your machinist. And again, generally, if they're not some, 80-year-old gruff guy, and sometimes they aren't, but, um, they'll be very happy to answer those questions for you. So, all right, let me get back to the comments. Sorry it took me so long, but, da, da, da. Um, yeah, I mean, the Edelbrock stuff is made by, I believe they are getting it from one company. They're also in Michigan. The cam cores are made by a company. Um, it, there's no reason to hide the name. EPC is the name of that cam core manufacturer. And then I don't know what lifter that they use with it, to be honest with you. It's a top line or a Delphi or something, but I have no problem with the Edelbrock stuff. It's matched. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth in just a second, but thanks for the question, John. 327 AR point at 304 spring pressure. What's a good lifter? Again, when you go back to when we talk about break-in procedure, it depends on what the cam is in there. And we're going to talk about that here really quickly on why. I'm going to piss some people off on this one. I apologize for that. But when you see a bunch of YouTube videos and the only thing that they talk about is the crown on that lifter is awful, so we regrind it and put the OE spec crown on there. That's really good as long as it matches the taper on the camshaft. So we'll talk about that more in depth, and hopefully it gets your answer your question here in just a minute there, purebred American Mutt, 1776. Sorry. Yeah, 200 over the nose rev limiter. Yeah, you can use a rev limiter if you want, but typically on break-in, we're talking very mild driving, 3,500 RPM on a big block. Small block, you can push a little bit higher, but not much. I wouldn't go past 3,000 or 4,000. You are just babying that thing, putting some heat into the engine, and driving it around with that 200 over the nose, over the top. And yeah, a rev limiter, if it helps you keep it under that a good RPM, it's a good thing to have. So it's not a bad tip for sure. Yep. Leave the inner spring out. Absolutely. BNR, Tappet, through 3 down 40 open. Yeah. Yeah, Pontiacs are a little bit different because it's Pontiac and Olds and big block Chevy, big heavy valve train, and break-in RPMs are different for sure. But when you talk about those lower RPM engines, Buick's in there as well too, I guess. You have to be very careful when you talk about what break-in is, because the break-in RPM changes a little bit. We'll talk about that. I hate to keep saying that, but I want to get to your comments. I don't want to ignore anybody, but we'll certainly talk about break-in RPM in just a quick minute, BNR. That's a good comment. I'm skipping past a little bit. I don't agree, I don't disagree with that, Troy. Sorry, I almost said I don't agree with you. I don't disagree with that. But I will tell you that aggressive lobe profiles are seen more on the older camshafts, and again, I don't mean to insult these cam manufacturers, the less sophisticated old school cam grinders. Again, that's not a slap on Crowler or Iski or any of those guys. They have made good horsepower and good product for decades and decades. but the more modern stuff that's out there tends to be a little bit easier on at least the opening side of that event. That was kind of one of the things that over the last 5 years of really trying to understand this problem and why it was happening, is what I saw is that the profiles that are out there today can be tailored a little bit more. If you look on a hydraulic roller, for example, some of those valve opening events, they preload the lifter or spring a little bit so it doesn't snap open. Whereas on an old school cam, everybody thought ramp it up as quick as possible, shut it as fast as possible, and get on to the next event. Not the case. You can control the spring a lot better and the push rod deflection a lot more with a softer either opening or closing, depending on the type of driving and racing you're using. But you make a great point on aggressive load profiles, and it's part of understanding it when you pick a cam grind or a custom grind with a manufacturer. They'll tell you how spicy that lobe is and tell you how aggressive it is, and it's a great question to ask for sure. Let's see. Steel City Caprice for my 355. Beehive Springs, Brook Marine, first time. Yeah, we're going to talk about oil in just a minute. Again, it's for whatever reason that's a really spicy topic, and I understand all of this is, but that one for sure on oil. But we'll talk about that in a quick minute too. Again, I hate saying that. It sounds like I keep pushing you off, but it's better than so making up something. So hang tight there, buddy. I'll be back to that one in just a second. Oh, please, Randall, you don't have any worry about that. I can do that all night. So, no, don't go to SEMA. PRI is next week in Indianapolis. Performance Racing Industry Show. I will be there. I'm there every single year. I'm at PRI or SEMA every year too, but PRI is the place to be. It is where all of the performance manufacturers are. I absolutely love it. I've got live stream videos on it. If you've never heard of PRI before, man, that is the ultimate. But yeah, take your ray gun to PRI because all those cam manufacturers will be there. You got me rolling tonight there, BNR. I appreciate that. Yes, this is very, very true. And that's why when we talked about the installed heights there in the comp book, you can look at those, but the ultimate is telling your machinist, look, I need to be down around that comfortable range to make sure that this thing survives on break-in. And I would like to be at 100 and 200. Tell me how to get there. And they can do that. They've done it enough typically that they know what spring that they can use and depending on the diameter and cup that you're working on or the pocket you're working on the cylinder head, they've got a spring in mind. Most of them do anyway. But you're very, very much true. You could take the triple spring apart and you still be 275, 280 somewhere in there. If you're in at the correct installed height for it. So it's a very, very good point. So it's not without the help of a machinist. I would always recommend that, or call the folks at Comp or Crow or Howard's, whoever your go-to is, and say, hey, here's what I want. Tell me what spring I can run. They'll usually be able to help you out with it. But that is a very, very good point. File not slipper body. Yep, we're gonna talk about that again too. So hang tight. I'm gonna be a little. The EDM thing was a nice thing to try, but I don't think it worked to save camshafts like people thought. If you look at the face of a good lifter, when you put drill a hole in there, no matter how light or small that hole is, the chances of that material starting to chip away, especially over the top where the pressure is the highest, is pretty high. I've seen EDM lifters that are a little boogered up that I know it's because the hole was starting to chip away and wear away, especially if you don't do the break-in properly. I think the EDM was a great idea. I just don't think that it produced the results that everybody wanted it to produce. I don't think it's the wrong application 100% of the time, but I don't think it's the end all be all of it. But it is a good point. Mr. Tool Junkie, how are you, buddy? Proper break-in oil. You just add. Yep. Again, we'll talk about that in just a quick second, but to the spoiler alert, I mean, I guess I've already talked about other videos, but I do not like an API off-the-shelf oil. Hang tight. Let me see if I can find one here. Yeah. So if you go to the auto parts store, pull a bottle off the shelf, and it's got that little round API donut. Okay, it'll tell you what the value is or what the rating is. This is the SN plus. Sorry, the camera's not focusing very well, but it's action cam. I would never, ever, ever, ever add a zinc additive to any oil that's got that API logo on it or that API donut. The reason being is the detergent that is in here will attack the zinc. Okay. So again, we'll talk about that more in depth here in just a quick second, but it's a good question that I didn't want to not talk about it. Whether you use remanufactured originals, I'm not a fan of regrinding lifters. The problem is these are a very, very inexpensive part. They don't, when they've already been broken in and the height of it changes because you've worn the face off, you've got to regrind a chamfer on there. You've got to regrind the crown on it. It's not that the metal's better, but when you start doing that, you start monkeying with the depth of the heat treat that is in that lifter. And I know that people have done it for decades, but it's typically on low spring pressure, farm equipment, stuff that's what I would trust it for. I would never run a set of reground lifters in anything that I'm running. I just don't believe that that's a good choice. Now, we've talked about Chinese made stuff before, and I've been to China. I don't remember what live stream we talked about, but I probably gave you too much info on it. But because I've spent a lot of time in the automotive aftermarket, I have had the opportunity to travel over there. And they do have the capability of making very, very high-end, high-quality stuff. You know, don't knock that and say everything that comes from China is crap. It's not true. I guess I can kind of go through it again, but I'll talk about it here in a minute again. But they have the capability of building quality stuff. The problem with stuff from China, people that import things from China, is if they say, okay, here's three springs of the spec that you wanted. This one is our top of the line greatest spring. It's got every spec that you wanted. We would put this up against any other manufacturer in the world. It is the highest quality metal. The tempering is perfect on it. It's wound perfectly. You're always going to get consistent, repeatable results with it. That is the highest quality part we can make. It is also the expensive one. I'm going to use a dollar amount here, but don't hold me to this. It's just an example. These are $100 a piece for that spring. Greatest quality. Now we've got one that's a little bit less. We don't spend near as much time on it. We don't measure QC on all of them. The heat treating may be a little off, but it's still a really good quality spring. It's mostly to the same spec that you want. When you get it in there, installed height, it should be fairly repeatable. You're not going to get the longevity out of it or the control that you're going to get out of that spring, but it's still a very good spring. This one costs $65 a piece, 165. Wow, that's amazing. Then they will say, this is literally the cheapest piece of crap that we can make you and still be in the spec that you're asking for. We don't do hardly any QC on it, none of it. Yeah, it's to the height that you want, the spec, the coils, all that stuff is correct, but you're going to get what you get on it. $25 a piece. Now, if you're an importer, And I'm going to pick on, I'm going to say this, but if you're one of those white box um, cam sellers out there that are putting together their own kits, they're not doing any of their own testing or whatever, and you go there and you know that you've got to make a certain amount of money on a product that you sell, which one of those springs are you going to buy? You're going to select almost 100% of the time the cheapest piece of crap that you can get away with in that cylinder head or lifter or cam or carburetor or whatever it is, connecting rod, rod bolts, main studs, cylinder heads. It doesn't matter what it is. Almost 100% of the time, I've seen that over and over and over and over again, where the quality is just not consistent across multiples, whether it's a pair of cylinder heads, where a set of 16 valve springs or lifters or whatever the case may be. Almost all the time, they will opt for, give me the cheap one. If it fails 10% of the time, we can throw that away. We can give the customer a new set. No problem. We're still ahead of the game. It's all financials at that point. That is a very common thing that I've seen over there in the trip that I made. And every manufacturer that I visited had that same pitch. Best, middle of the road, biggest piece of crap that I can give you. So, but don't think that everything from China is crap, because they have the capability of making it. It's just, does the importer choose to purchase it? So spend a little bit of time on that, but I thought it was important. It is a good question, and it's the reality of it. And that's why I'll always tell you to stick with those name brand manufacturers. And even if it's, Clay Smith, a smaller guy, or a Crow or a Howard's or a Comp, whatever it is, stick with those name brands, because they've got their brand name on the line, their reputation on the line, where some of those white box type of stuff that's out there, they just don't care. I don't think they're willing to take that chance, and they're taking the chance with you. So, all right. Sorry for droning on that one. So, you know what? I absolutely will. Slant Daily, if you guys are not following Slant Daily Garage, um, he's a Mopar guy, but he's not one of those really weird Mopar guys. He's actually a really cool Mopar guy. He's got a couple of darts, one with a really questionable name. I'm not going to say it, but I'll let him show it to you. But watch some of his videos. He does a live stream every Tuesday night with him and another gentleman that runs the AHRA, and their tech talks are next level. This stuff that we've talked about so far is kind of scratching the surface. The guy that runs Slant Daily Garage is an engineer by trade, and if he will give you a good solid answer with it. So if you're not following Slant Daily, get your butt over there, follow him, watch some of his videos, check out his live stream. You're going to totally dig it. I watch his live stream every Tuesday. So that's how good he is. So yes, but you can have an autograph. Yep, let's talk about break-in RPM. I guess we'll talk about that. So the heavier the valve train, the lower that RPM is going to be. If you're a small block Chevy, small block Ford, small Mopar, probably, even into some of the 340, 360 type stuff, no problem breaking in a cam at 22 to 2500 and kind of vary it a little bit. That's a pretty good strategy. When you talk about those big heavy valve trains, we talk about that big block cam we just looked at a minute ago. If you break in that cam at 2500 or 3000 RPM, you are increasing the chances of having a catastrophic failure. The valve train can't handle those pressures that you're putting it under. You're trying to be gentle with it. The heavier the valve train is, the lighter the RPM is. That's why I tell you, or I've made mention many times in this series, you have to talk to the cam manufacturer, and they will tell you what RPM is best for that engine. Because I assure you, a 455 Olds is not going to be broken in at the same RPM as a Slant 6. Just not going to happen. They do not work that way. Again, we're trying to increase the chances of things living, and engine break-in is huge on the RPM. It's one of those little points in it that I think is not addressed enough, because everybody just says, well, everyone online that says I break it in from, 22 to 25 or up to 3,000 RPM, vary it, whatever. Depends on the engine. You got to be very careful with that. And that is certainly a big part of the reason why cams fail. It's another one of those simple questions that I ask people when they say they've got a cam failure. What was your spring pressure, open and over the seat or over the nose? And what RPM did you break it in? Two very common questions that I ask. And if either one of those throw up red flags, you've got to start looking at it. It's not the cam manufacturer's fault. It's just that the procedure for whatever engine that is wasn't correct. So it's a good point. Ba, 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 ba. I'm gonna swing through here, try to grab some stuff. I apologize if I lose you. Just ask your question again if I. Terry Fuller, do you think using a less aggressive cam profile, more aggressive rocker arm would be something? Yep. Again, we're going to talk about. I guess we talk about that right now. Let's. I grabbed some stuff here. one of the comments that was left on a video, I don't know, maybe a week or so ago. Everybody that I have a comment on, I kind of scratched out their name. Didn't ask permission to use it, but the comment I'm going to use. So there are certain engines or some engines where you can use a reduced ratio rocker arm. Small block Chevys are very easy to get a hold of, obviously. Some of the other engines, not so much. I don't think you're going to find one for an Oldsmobile Buick out there in a reduced ratio. But the bigger the ratio, if it's a 1.7, a 1.76 ratio rocker arm, yeah, certainly by reducing that, you will take some of that spring pressure off, maybe without even changing the spring. But it's certainly it's something, again, it's a conversation to have with your machinist. Ask them, can I get a reduced ratio rocker arm for break-in? And they'll let you know if they've got them or if they can get a hold of them somewhere. But unfortunately, the more common engines are easier to get a hold of. So nothing fancy tonight. It's a Mountain Dew for me. Again, like I say, I'm not feeling very well, so I think I'm getting a cold or something. But that was a good question. I guess while we're doing this, somebody asked a minute ago about the cam comp lifter bore tool. I do like that tool quite a bit. I don't think if I was doing a flat tappet engine that I wouldn't use that grooving tool. It's a very, very good tool to help get some more oil in there to help that lifter facilitate the rotation of it. It's a good idea. But I think there's other bigger things in that to talk about. But anything, little detail like that, it's not a bad thing. So I think that that grooving tool is kind of definitely something you can certainly look into. So again, I don't know if you're a backyard assembler type of deal. Would I use it? Yeah, I don't think you can screw it up too bad, but if you feel better having a machinist do it, I don't think they charge you a whole lot of money to run that groove tool through the lifter bores and put a little extra oil in there for you. It's a good thing to talk about. So, let's see here. I'm just reading through some of your comments. Yep. Wednesday. Did I say Tuesday? I said Tuesday, didn't I? As soon as I said that, I knew I was an idiot. Slant Daily Garage is local to me, so I know him fairly well. I see him very frequently, talk very frequently, but Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central, y'all need to check that out. Next time he's on a live stream, I think you're going to have a good time with the technical stuff that he does. If you want to get into the really super technical stuff, but he'll answer any question you throw out there for him. So, especially if you're a Mopar guy, he's a very, very good Mopar guy, but you're not gonna stump him on too many things. So, well, let's see here. Yeah, so this is where it gets a little complicated on oil. There isn't one type of zinc. There's not zinc and the amount that's put in there. There is different types and different grades of zinc. I believe it was on the interview we did with Driven Racing Oil a year and a half ago, maybe. It's in my videos, or maybe it's under podcasts. I don't remember what it was, but they talk a little bit about the different types of zinc. Not all zincs are created equal. Not all zincs are the same. So when you're talking about different types of that additive, different levels of it changes. So the point I'm trying to make is there is no set. You have to be at 5,000 parts per million on a break-in oil, or you're going to have problems. You have to, or you need to be on a typical, when you're done type of oil like this Driven GP1, at 1,200 to 14 parts per million. It depends on the type of zinc they're using and what other additive are in the package. I've learned a lot from the Driven guys and Lake Speed over the last 10 years of talking to them. And that's one thing that always stuck with me is, Lake's got really good ways of explaining it to kind of put a hook on it. Again, if you want a good YouTube channel to follow, The Oil Geek, I think is the name of his channel now. But if you just Google Lake Speed Jr., you'll find him, or if you put in Lake Speed Jr. into the search engine there in YouTube, you'll see it. But very, very good detail on it. Not all oils are created the same. Not all additive packages that go into the base oil are the same, and not all zinc is the same. So it's hard to put a finite number on that when you don't know what the combination of zinc and moly is. You don't know what the combination of the zinc and the calcium is. You don't know what type of zinc they're using. They're all a little bit different. So again, it's really the reason why I trust the Driven stuff over any other brand on the market. One, because that's where my education in it came from, is listening to Lake talk in a lot of AERA tech seminars and other training seminars. He's at PRI every year doing some sort of seminar. He works for Total Seal piston rings right now. So he does a lot of stuff on that as well too, but he does a very, very good job of explaining the zinc. And I think if you go search that YouTube channel, I think he just changed the name of his channel. So it used to be Speed Diagnostics, which is the name of the diagnostic company that he runs on the side with his daughter, I believe. But they will do an oil analysis of your oil. We did a break-in or the oil analysis on the break-in on the GMC truck, if you want to check out that video. But when this video is over, in the description, I'll throw a link to his channel. So, but he's got good stuff on it. He's a nerdy tribologist, but he's one of the smartest people you'll ever listen to. So, let's see. Pulled cam springs up to 72 per and 70 Mopar. Okay, just such faces. Yeah, there was one here. This one is, you can't really, well, maybe you can tell that one's kind of concave. It's almost like a cup. Let me see if I've got anything here. Well, you know what I'll do. This oil's open. Let me see if you can see that. Hopefully I don't spill oil all over my bench. I probably will. See, I told you. It's just character. But anyway, that one's got a nice cup to it. But if I would have poured that correctly, it would have just pooled in there. But that one's the same. Now, I believe it was rotating, but look also the discoloration. Look at the amount of heat that generated. The chamfer is gone on this thing. It absolutely destroyed that. It wasn't going to be much longer without lifter, and it was going to be shot. I'm going to take some pictures of these lifters and throw them on my Instagram channel or page after this, I guess, and then I'll probably throw them in my YouTube group if you're or the Facebook group if you're over there. But just so you can see some of that. But that is wildly discolored. There was a tremendous amount of heat on there. We're going to talk about that one in just a second too. I knew I was going to jack that up pouring that oil. That was stupid, but it was a good question. Yeah, we just talked about that, Gary. I'm not a really big fan of the EDM stuff. I like the idea of it. There's probably some applications that it works, but I think for an average street car, an under 600 horsepower street car, I would never use an EDM on a street engine. There's probably a good application for it. I just don't know what they are. I'm going to blow past some of yours because I know that a lot of these are a lot of the questions or a lot of comments you're making are back and forth. So this is a good one. Is Rotella diesel oil usable? Sure, if you have a diesel. Here's the thing about Rotella. When the API spec on the diesel oil changed, and my God, there was a guy in, I can't remember what video I did, but we talked about oil specifically, and I made mention of this. When the oil changed from the older spec of diesel oil to the spec that they're at now, dictated by the EPA and whatever other things that they use in a diesel to control emissions, and zinc is one of those things that they have tried to reduce. That oil went from being an okay everyday oil to one that I would not use in anything. The detergent levels are different in a diesel because you've got more crap from a diesel engine, soot, and all that other nasty stuff in it. The detergents in a diesel engine are much different than they are in a hot rod, classic car, street car, race car, even gas powered stuff. I am not a fan of the Rotella at all. There's no situation other than my tow vehicle. Well, I don't have a diesel tow vehicle anymore, but I would use Rotella in that, no problem. It's the level of zinc and the additive package doesn't match up with what you're using. Lake's got a nice thing. We just talked about Lake a minute ago. The right oil, the right amount at the right time. And those are all very critical. I know it sounds kind of cliche and whatever, but it's very, very true. And I don't believe Rotella is the right oil for a gas-powered hot rod because of the additive packages they use to control the crap in the diesel, and the zinc isn't there if you need it for a flat tappet engine. Would I use it? Absolutely not. This is a really good question. I don't think so. As long as there's that 604 or one of those other stock crate engine type programs out there, there's still a lot of racing classes that facilitate or dictate a flat tappet cam use for whatever reason. It does balance the field out a little bit. But do I think they're going away? I think you're going to see less and less offering in it, and you're going to see more manufacturers that are going to be a little bit more protective of what they put into the market. But certainly the DLC comp lifter changes that a little bit. You could see a little bit of a resurgence in it because these DLC lifters, when we talked about it a year ago or in January, damn near a year ago, when I did the first video discussing these aren't that much more money. They're like $20, $25 more than just a regular set of stock small block Chevy lifters. So that changes the game. So if the break-in changes, the wear on the lifter changes, and the cam core likes it a lot better, then I think the flat tappet cams can still be viable for a long period of time. That being said, I haven't built a flat tappet cam engine in 20 years. I don't know that I would again. I've been roller ever since, but I think the new technology, especially in that DLC, and Shane there at Slant Daily Garage has had a couple of good live streams. The last couple weeks, he's talked about that DLC lifter a little bit more, and talked a little bit more in depth about what that lifter is and what it's designed to do. But I think because that thing has been wildly successful, and if it gets into the other engine platforms and sizes, I think you're going to find that that will come back a little bit, or less people less apprehensive about it. And if you're willing to purchase it and it will sell well, then those retailers or manufacturers will keep making it. So it's a very, very good question. Da, da, da. Here is one thing that MSH68, at the very beginning of this video, or 20, 30 minutes ago, I made mention that probably the top one or two things of the 5 or 6 things we talked about, that spring pressure was right there at the top of the list. The other one that's at the top of the list is lifter bores. There is no cam manufacturer in the world that can compensate for a lifter bore that's worn, it's ovaled, it's been on the road for 100,000 miles, and those engines were never designed to be around that long. They've stayed around that long. They've been bored a few times. They've been line honed a few times. They're okay. The core may have shifted a little bit on the cam, but the lifter bore itself is such a neglected part of it. I covered this fairly extensively in the last video in the series when we talked about lifters, but the lifter bore, if it's off, if it is worn, if it's ovaled, if it's had some core shift in it because it got hot, and don't get it twisted. An engine block that's been, once it's set, you can still ruin it with a lot of heat, and a lot of wear to where the bore will shift over. I don't have the gauge, but we ran through and measured out the gauges in, I think, the Pontiac that I've got sitting over here on the floor next to me. But lifter bores are one of the most neglected things. And as soon as someone wipes a camshaft out, they go, well, must have been a Chinese cam. What a hunk of crap. Lifters are junk. They must be all from China. There's no way to tell that unless you specifically make sure your machinist tells you, or you tell your machinist, I want you to measure every single lifter bore. I want you to document that and tell me what that bore diameter is. And either you do the math and I'll do the math so I can determine what the diameter or what the clearance is on a lifter. This is an 842 Chevrolet lifter, obviously. It's the DLC. I guess you're upside down. But they will give you the measurement of that bore, and the diameter of the lifter. And if that tolerance is off enough, it can hang that lifter up and keep it from rotating, because it doesn't matter how good the oil pressure is to that lifter bore. If it doesn't have the right amount of tolerance between the bore and the lifter and the oil film that's around it that helps it rotate, and the crown on the lifter and the taper on the lobe, you will wipe those cams out over and over and over again. And I've seen that millions of times, it seems like, over the last 15, 20 years, when this problem is really intensified. And one of the things I ask people is, well, did your machinist give you the specs, the wear specs on your lifters, on your lifter bore? What are you talking about, dude? They were fine. Everyone's heard of boring a block because the pistons are, the bore is out. And so what do? You bore it over to clean it up, to clean the speck of the bore out. But nobody ever talks about getting the lifter bores correctly to again make sure that they didn't shift at all, to make sure that the cam is riding in the correct location on the lobe, that's not ovaled. All of those things matter, and lifter boards for whatever reason are seriously neglected. So again, if you want to talk about my top two things that wipe out camshafts, it's not the lifter, it's the bore, and the lack of knowing what the tolerance is between the bore and the lifter is, and the spring pressures. Those I think are the top two things. Now again, everything else we've talked about and we're going to talk about are important, but without a doubt, I would bet whatever you wanted to bet on it, a cheeseburger, a 12 pack of beer, whatever it is, um, that if you have a wiped out motor, or you're talking to somebody that says, well, I bought, two sets of these freaking Howard's cams and both of them wiped out on my engine. Well, cool. Well, did you go back through and did you have the right spring pressure and break in? Did you get the tolerance on the lifter bores? And those two, almost 100% of the time, is I don't need to worry about that. I don't know what you're talking about. My machinist never told me that. The Camp Howard's never told me that, or Comp never told me that. Doesn't matter. Those are basic things that you have to do on your own, or your machinist has to tell you. So sorry for the long rant on that one, but that lifter bore, and I'm glad you asked that question there, MSH68. That is a huge part of the reason why these cams fail. You're talking about engines that aren't 2 years, 10 years, 20 years old. Hell, the small block in the GMC's 50 some years old, 52 years old. Um, those things wear, and for whatever reason, I just don't think it's given enough attention by the machine shop, and certainly as consumers, we're not asking for those measurements so we can know what that tolerance is between the body of the lifter and the bore and the block. Again, we covered that in the lifter video extensively, but that in itself, those are the top two reasons why I think you get most of the failures that you get. Incorrect, because again, if the tolerance is off on that lifter isn't going to rotate, and that rotation has to happen for that lifter to live. When it stops rotating, like this one clearly did, right? That's what happens to it. And you can tell, look how whacked out the side of this thing is. It's kind of hard to tell, I guess, because the camera sucks and I can't really focus it that well. But we'll fix that down the road here on these live streams. But this thing stopped rotating, and I guarantee you it was either the bore of the lifter, or it was offset on the cam and it was not allowing the cam to rotate, or the lifter to rotate. Maybe the crown was wrong on the lifter, maybe the taper was wrong, they didn't match on the camshaft. But man, that bore, that one drives me up the wall, because when you ask people about it, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Make your machinist give you that information. Tell them, I want it documented of what the spec was for each one of the bores in that block. Tell me which ones are off and which ones I need to be worried about, and I'll do the math, so you can help me do the math on to make sure that it's got the right tolerance, that it has the right rotation in it, and I can get this thing to live. So I'm glad you asked that question. It was a perfect segue into talking about that. But that is easily one of the top two reasons why I think a lot of these fail is we're not spending enough time looking at the block, looking at the bore. We're just blaming the cam and the lifter, and not looking what for the actual problem was. So sorry to go out to sound like I was ranting on there, but I don't disagree with that, Tom. And I think, to be very honest, again, we talked about this pretty heavily, I think, in the lifter video. Maybe it was the first one, but let's talk about the economics of a lifter really quickly. In the mid 80s, 30 some years ago, my God, time flies. When the OE stopped using flat tappet camshafts in their uh, engines that go out the door for the brand new cars and trucks that are on the road, those lifter manufacturers stopped manufacturing these or wanted to quit manufacturing them because, sorry, these are way over here, because they were doing a roller cam, or they're doing a roller lifter roller cam. There's more money because these are obviously, I'm going to throw some numbers out here, but don't hold me to it. Let's say the set of hydraulic roller lifters are $500 a set, and the flat tappet lifters are $100 a set. When you look at the dollar amount that manufacturer puts in the bank for the margins that they have to make on it, it doesn't make sense to continue making a flat tappet lifter. And I do believe that the lifter is one of the bigger things that has suffered in quality because they're not the top of their food chain. They're not being asked to do them. They want to continue to produce the lifter that the OE is using. And so these lifters are what they want to talk about, or they want to work on. They want to keep selling. The OE spends the most amount of money, and it puts more dollars in their bank account. There are lifter manufacturers. Delphi is one of them. It was the biggest GM lifter manufacturer in the world, or flat tappet lifter. 4 or 5 years ago, they told their suppliers, all of them, we're done. We're not making flat tappet lifters anymore. We're going to switch over to roller. We're here to support the OE. They came back to them because there was enough yelling and screaming that I need them. They raised their price on them. And that's why you see the prices where they're at today. But it doesn't make financial sense for it. So I don't think they're purposely doing it, but I don't think the quality is there. Now, that is 100% my opinion. A lot of the other things we talked about tonight are not opinion, they're fact. That's just my opinion that those manufacturers, because I understand the business side of things way more than I understand everything else, financially, it makes more sense for them to produce a roller set of lifters than it does flat tappets. And I think because of that, the quality has fallen a little bit. So just my opinion on that. Again, I wouldn't, don't take that for gospel. That's just strictly my opinion. So, um, oh yeah. Again, I'm not knocking it. Rotella's great for a diesel engine. I just wouldn't use it in a gas motor. Detergent's not right, and the zinc isn't correct. And again, because the zinc is different, even if it's got 1,300 parts per million, even if that's what they want in it, a diesel zinc is different than the formulation of a gas engine zinc is. They're two different types of zinc. Uh, yeah, there is. The good thing about Lake is he's been doing it for 20 some years. He's a very, very smart engineer, anthropologist, and he tries to stay on the cutting edge of things. He's not like again, I'll pick on some folks, but he's not the 70-year-old, 60-year-old engine builder who found a recipe that worked. They're not going to deviate from them. They're always going to use the exact same cam, the exact same lifters, exact same uh, spec on the bore and stroke, whatever it is, they're going to stick by that recipe. Lake is one that continues to watch and push the evolution. That's why I love seeing him at Total Seal, because of things like this. If there's better things out there, if there's a better lubricant for, for that break in, or that, long-term use of an engine in those things, absolutely. I'm all for it. I'm not a huge fan of the electric car stuff, but I love the technology and what it's doing to push it forward. And zinc is certainly one of those things that I think if they come up with a better chemical, then let's use it. Especially if it helps keep things last together. So, uh, yeah, on a race engine, sure. A lot of times the bore will be bushed so you can get the tolerance exactly where you want to be. I just don't think enough time is spent on the average street engine. Yeah, it's really all kind of, let's just shine up here. No, see, that's where I have a that's where I again point to the lifter on the table here that is made in China. Again, you can't tell, and I know the guys at Comp well enough after having a 35-year relationship with them to know that none of their lifters, flat tappet lifters, at least up until today anyway, are made in China. It's not that they're having all of the failures because the lifters are garbage. I think there's other things at play. Lifter bore diameter and not, checking what that is in the engine. And I believe it's the spring. They're the two biggest things. Remember, we just talked about that a minute ago. It doesn't matter how great it is. It could be it's a bad example, but it could be a tool steel cam and a perfect DLC lifter to go with it. And if you use the wrong spring pressure, or if you use the wrong, or the lifter isn't rotating on that flat tappet, I don't care what material you made it out of, where it came from, it will fail. It's not that they all come from China. And I cringe every time I see those videos of, well, it must be just a Chinese lifter that Comp sells. You don't know that. You don't have any clue about that. I know where their lifters come from because I know those manufacturers here in the US. And again, I think the quality has changed in it, but also too, the break-in on these things you need to change to adjust to that. If you want to run a flat tappet cam, you need to break it in with a lighter spring pressure. You need to make sure that the lifter boards are correct. So I don't get irritated by that, but prove it to me. And I've walked through the facility at Comp Cam 100 times. I know where their lifters come from because I see the boxes on their shipping dock when it's there. Not a single one of them says China on it. I know exactly what those manufacturers are. And that's what drives me crazy about this whole deal. And that's the reason why I think the conversation gets so spicy about this is everybody just saying, well, it failed. It must be Chinese crap. Well, what spring pressures did you use? What did you check the lifter bores? Tell me what the clearance was on the lifter to the bore. What was your break-in oil that you used? All of those little details are correct. Did you mix an off-the-shelf API oil and a zinc additive and expect it to be right? There is a lot of things at play here. There's not one thing that'll help keep the entire thing together. You may get that one thing right and it may help. And you go, well, that was a made in the USA cam. No, it wasn't. You just got lucky. It's just, it's frustrating because, every cam manufacturer that makes flat tappet cams is having failures. And it's not like they all got together and went, okay, let's find the cheapest crap that we can buy out in the market. Remember, we talked about springs a minute ago and good, better, best. None of them will do that. They will opt for the higher quality stuff or the best quality they can buy because it's their name on the line. But they can't control what your break-in spring pressures were. They don't have any control of that. They have no idea what block it's going into. They can't control what the tolerance is. That has to be done locally. Your machinist has to do that for you. And I think that's a majority of the reason why these failures are happening. It's a combination of all of these. But I do firmly believe, again, this is my opinion, that the quality of the lifter has changed. They're still USA made manufacturers. I'm not going to rattle them off. We talked about Delphi a minute ago. They're still making them. There's still a lot of them that are made in the U.S. Now, are all of them made in the U.S.? No, but I think, again, if you look at those brands that are on the market that have a really cheap camshaft and lifter set, you could probably do that math on your own and figure there's something fishy here. They didn't just cut all their profit out of it to sell it at their cost because they want to do it. They're still making the same amount of profit. They're just getting it from a cheaper source. So, let's see here. I'm sorry, there's a lot of comments here. I appreciate that, but I know I'm blowing past a number of them. So, yeah. So here's the thing about that. And again, another great question. I've seen people have tagged me in a number of videos in places that say, well, as soon as a set of cam and lifters come in, this machinist will measure the crown on the lifter, and if it's not to the OE tolerance, they will regrind it. Now that's fine, but the lifter has to match the taper on the cam. You can't just arbitrarily change one without making sure that it's going to work with the lobe that you have on there. That's why I'll always say to always buy these in a match set. If you're going to buy a Crower cam, buy the Crower lifter that goes with it. Now, Crower's a little bit more higher quality. They're kind of along Howard's and Comp in that aspect, where they use a 1.5 thou on the crown on the lifter. That's what the OE spec was, and the taper on the cam matches up with that. But don't buy a cam off the shelf from Summit or any other cam manufacturer and say, well, I'm going to put this lifter on there. They have to match up there. I've seen some really, really wild taper camshafts of manufacturers that are most of them are in really niche marks. I won't talk about them specifically because I don't want to, call them out on anything, but they have a really, really weird taper on the camshaft. It's because they bought a lifter with a really oddball crown, and that's what it needed to stay together. So when you see those videos of guys saying, yep, every lifter that comes in, we measure and we regrind it to put it that 1.5 thou. Okay. What was the taper on the cam? They go together. It's peanut butter and jelly. It's ham and burger. It's Kool-Aid and sugar, whatever the case may be. Ham and burger. I think I stole that from Friday, whatever. But they have to go together. They have to match. You can't just arbitrarily change one without making sure that it's going to work with the taper on the cam. So I cringe when I see that, and I've been tagged in it, and I don't fault them for wanting to put it at that factory OE crown. I fully agree with that is the best crown to have on a lifter, because that has been proven for millions and millions of engines and billions of miles on those engines as they were produced in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Well, I guess 80s they stopped, but you know what I mean? And that is the correct crown. But if it doesn't match the taper on the cam, you are opening yourself up to a much bigger problem. So have to be careful about that. Yeah, I get a little irritated about Chinese stuff anyway. I don't have any problem with it, to be honest with you, in some things, but when you're blatantly knocking off things that a U.S. manufacturer put their heart and soul and R&D money and time, there's some things that are made, cylinder heads from Edelbrock or AFR or whoever it is you go with. They probably spent $200,000-$300,000 on the development of that cylinder head. They need to sell a ton of them to go out there to make their money back, and then start making some money on it so they can do some research on other things in the future. And then to have a company knock off something in China, it absolutely boils my hide that no one cares about that. You can talk about it all day long, but people vote with their wallet. And if they see that Edelbrock carburetor that's $450, but there's a one brand new one on eBay for $198 or $175 or whatever those crappy knockoffs are getting, they will do that all day long. Made in China doesn't mean crap to anybody when it's time to whip the wallet out. So sorry, I'm ranting a lot here. I guess again, I'm not feeling very good tonight, so sorry about that. Yeah. So again, I'm about 5 years younger than you are there. Quo Vadis, whatever. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, we always broke them in back in the day, but it wasn't nearly. And I had failures back then. I mean, we failed a couple of them. My dad and I had a 355 that we put together for a little 72 Vega drag car that I had, and it was the first engine I ever built, and we wiped that thing 10 minutes into break-in. So it was probably spring pressure or the lifter bores were bad in that engine. But I don't think we ever used it again. I think we went to a different block just because of it had bad mojo in it or something. But the longer that those been out there on the road, the more problems you're going to have with lifter bores being worn and or being core shifted and not being centered on the or where they need to be offset a little bit on the lobe so it facilitates rotation. It's only going to get worse. No matter what you do, even with the DLCs that are out there, you can't change the lifter bore and you can't change the location of that lifter on the cam. So, oh, let's see here. Yeah, I always, like I say, whatever that cam manufacturer suggests, I always will go with that. Um, Follow their instructions, follow their lead. If they tell you that 115 is okay on the seat pressure and 220 is fine on the over the nose pressure, then fine, break it in there. If they tell you they want it under 200 or 100 on the seat, then do it there. If they tell you that you have to run, a certain type of oil, again, running a really thick oil in these lifters is not a good idea. That set of hydraulic rollers failed because the guy was running a 2050 weight oil in there. I don't care where you've seen it or the success that somebody else has may had, but when you run a really thick oil in a roller, it's not a good thing for them. You're rolling the dice. But yeah, always follow the lead of the manufacturer. If they give you the specs, then stick to it. Follow their instructions. But it's a smart thing to do every time you buy it. Is what's my break-in RPM that you need it at? How long should the break-in last, and at what RPM? And then obviously the spring pressures and all the other little details. But always ask. And again, I'm not knocking the guys at Summit or Jegs or Amazon or wherever you buy your camshaft from, but none of their tech guys know. Don't listen to what a tech at Jegs tells you of what the break-in RPM and time and everything needs to be on any camshaft. Call the manufacturer that it's coming from and ask them directly. They'll tell you. They want it to live. They don't want it to break on you. They don't want it to fail on you. They want you to be happy, go make horsepower, do burnouts, and have a great time. So, yeah. So the DLC stuff from Comp, I think is again because that has done so well over the last year. I think that's what's going to change really the lifter side of things. It's hard to see that black face on there, but that DLC coating is literally just on the face of the lifter. It's nowhere else because that's where the failure starts. Remember the interview we had with Driven or Lake or somebody, or maybe it was the Billy Godbold interview we did, is failures always start at a microscopic level. And the failure on a flat Tappet cam always will start on the face of the lifter or on the lobe. And that DLC coating on that lifter is changing the game in the survivability of these lifters. I can't wait to see the other ones come out on the market because then everybody else can kind of enjoy it. Right now, the small block and big block Chevy guys, and I guess the 409 guys are in there too, are benefiting that because it's the highest volume stuff. But these lifters are absolutely amazing. So, matter of fact, speaking of Slant Daily Garage, he gave me back my cam because he was talking about it on his live stream. See how this one's worn? That's the DLC coating. It looks practically brand new. That was out of the Comp Spintron machine, and I don't know how many millions of cycles they put on this thing, but that thing took some long, long abuse in that engine. And that coating on the top looks just about as fresh as it's a little worn, but not not as bad as some of these other lifters are that have been in for a long time. that DLC coating is the real deal. You can see where it was in the bore. But I also guarantee you that Comp measured those lifter bores before they put in there. I didn't notice that till just now, Shane. Thank you for including that. I'll get it back to you so you can get it back to the guys at Comp. But yeah, that one is very, very cool. Shane talked about that on his live stream a couple of weeks ago, where he talked about how many millions of cycles were on there. I don't know if he's still on, but that lifter has been abused, and that thing looks as clean and as beautiful as the day it went in there. And when you're talking about millions of cycles, that's hundreds of thousands of revolutions and up and down in it and miles. And the way a spintron works is there's a really good video on the Comp YouTube page. It's been out for maybe 4 or 5 years, but a spintron is designed to put that into the engine, and it goes from 4,500 RPM up to 6,000, 7,000, 6,500 RPM, holds for a second or two, goes back down to 3,500, 4,000, and then back and forth for millions of cycles to try to destroy these things. And that DLC looks like the day it was born. You can damn near see my face in there if I angle it over here. So absolutely remarkable. But that DLC I am so stoked for that. Because again, somebody asked it earlier, do you think flat tappet cams will go away? Not if that DLC gets out there on more lifters, and then we'll have less failures and things will be good as long as the block is in good shape. Not necessarily. On a like a 1.7, 1.76 rocker, you can drop down to like a 1.2, 1.3 and still have take a lot of pressure off of it. But again, the problem with the reduced ratio rocker arms is they're just not available for everything. Especially when you get into more sophisticated stuff like the Mopar shaft mounted stuff, it's harder to get a hold of. Yeah, everything can blow up, that's for sure. But again, if you're talking about those manufacturers that they want to continue to produce those lifters, because if you're a lifter manufacturer, and again, we talked about this in those videos before, if you're a lifter manufacturer and GM comes to you and says, I need 3 million sets of lifters this quarter. Awesome. To keep that contract, you're going to deliver them at the price GM wants to pay for them, or Ford or Chrysler or whoever. You're going to deliver at the price they want to pay, and you're going to deliver them on time and not miss those dates at all. Those are critical on an OE supplier, and those tier one suppliers, manufacturers that make those for GM or Ford, that contract, they have to abide by that, or GM charges them a fee back for missing a date, missing a production deadline, whatever the case may be. They are hypersensitive to that. Well, in today's world where it's hard to hire people, it's hard to hire qualified machinists and engineers, they will do whatever they can to make sure that they keep that money rolling into the bank. And why make a flat tappet lifter when all your money is coming from the OE? These are just there to take up whatever extra production time they have in their facility. That's it. If they could get away from doing flat tappet lifters, I guarantee you talk to Delphi, Topline, any of those other companies that do flat tappet lifters, they would tell you probably all day long, I would run as fast as I could because I put more money in the bank when it's a more expensive part. So, again, I apologize if I'm blowing past some of your comments. There's quite a bit of them here, and I'm way behind. So, yeah, that's the problem too. Is when you have that kind of mushroom over. Sometimes they're hard to get out of the block, and you're gonna have a heck of a time with it. That's for sure. Again, I don't. It's not that it's. when you talk about comp, when you outsell everyone else in the world in this performance market, again, you could add up everyone else out there. Howard's, Iskey, Clay Smith, Summit, Luminati, Crane, doesn't matter what, you could add those all together and they wouldn't come close to what comp sells in a year. The more you sell, the more you're in the market, the more failures you're going to have. And again, they're all buying the lifter, most of them anyway, from the same place. A lot of them are buying the cam cores from the same US manufacturers. It's not that comp's doing anything different. It's just when you have more of them out there, you're going to have more failures. So. I'm just trying to read through your comments as quickly as possible to get kind of caught up here. So I apologize for blowing past it. No. So right now the DLC coding that comp has is only for the small and big Chevy and the W motor Chevrolet engines. Eventually, I think it's their plan to have them offer them for everything. But right now, that's all they have them for. The cam cores and the flat tappet cams haven't changed. They are still the same camshaft that was always produced. It's just that with the DLC coded lifter on it, you're taking that break-in part of it and that wear part of it out of the equation. You still have to break it in, I think, with the right spring pressure. You still have to make sure that the block is correct and that the bores are good and to spec. But you're taking a big part of that equation out with that DLC lifter. So the cam cores and the camshafts haven't changed at all. They are running those on their regular flat tappet cams for those Chevrolet engines. And again, they'll be available fairly soon for everything else. And again, I think it's going to change the game because it's not going to increase the price of the camshaft that any, and you're only increasing the cost of the lifter by $20, $30. Now that may change over time. I think that DLC coatings, I don't know how expensive it is, but I think they probably had to buy a butt ton of those to get that DLC coating down to where it wasn't an extra $100. But if you're a flat tappet cam guy and that camshaft costs you $250, would you pay $200 for a set of DLC coated flat tappet lifters if you're all but guaranteed, if everything else was correct, right oil, bores, everything, to keep the thing together? I would. I would pay it in a heartbeat. So, but yeah, no, the cams are the same. So I think I got a sore throat coming in. So no beer for me tonight. It's all Mountain Dew. The DLC coating is it's coating is kind of a bad term for this. It's a coating, but it's microns thick. We're not talking thousandths of an inch thick. It's not measured that way. It's very, very light. And on other applications, whether it's on piston skirts, whether it's on a tool steel lifter, that depth could change. But on the comp stuff, that face is very, very thin. It's like I said, it's microns on the depth of those things. So yeah, on pistons and depending on what else it is, yeah, it's you're going to have, I think, quite a bit of difference in the depth of them. So, you know what, you might be able to. It all depends on what the taper on those really horrible, awful. I wouldn't put one in my lawnmower Summit camshafts. Did I kind of go around that right? But yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not a fan of the. I'm not a fan of the white box stuff from those manufacturers. So, hey, man, glad to see you. Let's see here. No, here's the thing. No one else is doing DLC coating on a hydraulic flat tappet. There are some DLC coated tool steel lifters, but they're thousands of dollars for the set of 16. And on the roller lifters on the wheel, I haven't seen anybody do a DLC because, quite honestly, the wheel doesn't wear out that frequently. It doesn't seem. Now, some of the retrofit camshafts, you have to be really careful because if you have any of core shift in that block, and that wheel is um, off of the lobe, one way or the other, you can run into some problems there. That's the only place where I've seen really bad things happen. But again, it goes back to the condition of the block, not the quality of the lifter. But somebody eventually, I think, will probably do a DLC wheel um, lifter if it ever gets to the point where they're failing quite a bit. So, yep. Um, Jimmy, I can't remember. Were you the one on Instagram that was showing me your pictures of your small block that you had put together that you had some questionable wear on it? I apologize if it wasn't you, um, but I mentioned you earlier. If it was you, I think you messaged back and forth. But yep, DLC coming for the Mopar. They didn't say when. I'm going to press them a little bit at PRI, see if we can get a better answer out of it. But I think they're wrapping up the R&D on it now, so you 904 guys should have them out pretty quickly. Ah, yes, it was. Okay, cool. So I mentioned you earlier, Jimmy, and I was gonna grab those pictures that I think you sent me in the message DM over there. But yeah, you don't need to worry about that. Those wore right what the comp engineer said it was going to. I know they looked kind of funky on the cam, but he said run that thing till the wheels fall off the car. They were very happy to see those pictures actually, because and the more data that they can get, the better off it is, because they can do all the testing they want, but real world is better. So I hope you got the thing back together and I hope it's running for you. But I mentioned you earlier, I just was going to steal those pictures out of there and use them tonight, but I kind of totally forgot about it. So, and I probably should have probably asked your permission first anyway. This is an interesting. I didn't read the entire thing. I stopped when I saw that. Yes, you can use the Chevrolet saw lifters in a Pontiac, but here's the problem with it, and you're very, very correct with this. This is the reason why I love the DLC. The engineer at Comp that did this was Billy Godbold. We interviewed Billy 6 months ago, right when his book came out. If you want to watch that interview, and he talked about the development of the DLC. But one thing that we didn't talk about in that video is the reason why he was so excited about it is that he had the ability now to move the oil band where it needed to be. And on like a Pontiac motor, that band is in a different location. It rides in a different spot to pick up oil. I don't know what any of these are. I know that's a 842. Let's see what this is. This looks like a 904. Yeah, it's a 904. It's a Mopar. I'm trying to find one that the band's a little bit funky on. This one feels. So this is an 842 lifter. Okay. Look at the band difference in it, in this where they're at. Now, I don't know what this lifter was. I don't remember. I didn't mark all these. That's a small block Chevrolet one, the DLC one. But the height may be the exact same. The diameter is the exact same. But when you put that band in a different location, it can cause problems. That's why the comp guys were so excited about it, because it was going to allow them to change that, because those lifter manufacturers, remember we talked about that before, they would make whatever they could fit into the most applications, because when you change tooling or diameters or where the band is at in it or internals on it, it throws off their ability to make things repeatable and over and over and over again. We keep a machine running. you have the ability to make them cheaper and make more money on it. So that's why the guys at Comp were so excited, because especially on a Pontiac or whatever, they were going to be able to adjust that oil band. It's a really, really good point. There being our, but yeah, just because it's the same diameter doesn't mean that the oil band's in the right spot. So really good point. Okay. Here is again. I'm gonna throw this up here because I had this came on a couple of days ago. Well, it was 2 days ago, and I think I pulled that screenshot yesterday. So 3-ish days ago on one of my videos, this person said break-in oils and assembly loom are a scam. I would venture to guess that if you talk to 100, 200, if there's 200 left in the US, engine builders that do performance engine building or anything that involves flat tappet cams, hell, even roller stuff. If you told them that break in oil was a scam, all 100, all 200 would laugh at you and say, I got to go. I got other things to do. There is no machinist in the world, engine builder in the world, that would say that break in oil is a scam. Absolutely not. The reason why break in oil is so important is because they take all the detergent out of the oil and you have less of it and you have more of the zinc to protect the wear of that engine at break in. Now, when you talk about break in on an engine, we're not talking about just breaking in the camshaft. You also have to break in and seat the rings on a new engine. And you can't have a lot of detergent wiping all that off there. You need to facilitate the wear. And break in oil is a advancement in it. It's like having a Nokia flip phone and an iPhone 15. They're two totally different things that are out there. If this helps the engine wear better, take heat better, let the rings wear in better, let the cam wear in better, it is absolutely an upgraded deal. To say that it's a scam, to say that it's not worthwhile, it's not worthy, again, no machinist that I've ever talked to would ever take that and say, you're out of your mind. Now, I understand being skeptical. I'm skeptical of everything. It's why I try to question things as they come along, and that's why the reason why I did these videos where I actually showed you stuff. That's why I spent the money that it took to have this cam core cut in half so you could see the depth of the heat treating on it. I'm not going to sit there on a whiteboard and draw things out for you or just talk about it and not give you anything. I'm going to show it to you to prove it to you that something is what I'm trying to tell you. There are way too many YouTubers out there, folks on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, that will just say, this is the way it is, and you have to believe me. I will show you the results. The good thing about break-in oil, especially with Driven, because they're the ones that pioneered break-in oil, everyone else that does it now, they got that idea from Driven. It's good, whatever you want to run, Lucas, or I don't like Royal Purple, but whatever you want to run that has a good break-in oil, they will show you the data behind that to show you the reason why break-in oil is such a big advantage to an engine. And again, we're not talking about just one part in the cam and lifters. We're talking about all those other things in an engine that need to wear together. And piston rings are a big part of it. Again, I'm going to sit through a seminar here in 4 days from now, 3 days from now in Indianapolis with Lake, talking about rings and oil and break-in time and machining and how to hone a block to do it correctly so you get the best result out of it. So saying that break-in is a not needed, it's a scam, like that commenter said. Okay, then run without it and see what happens with it. But yeah, it's very much a very good thing. And like I say, it's the difference between using an old Nokia flip phone to take pictures and the images that you can do on a new iPhone 15 at 25 megapixels or whatever the hell they are at now. So anyway, again, I'm not trying to rant here, but I know it sounds like it, but again, partially that's just my way I am, and I don't feel good. So I don't not trying to bark at you there, Tom. Please don't take that. I'm glad you made that comment because I wanted to throw that up there to show that. But it's absolutely not a scam, and you don't have to take my word for it. Talk to an engine builder. Talk to any engine builder and ask them directly, is break-in oil a scam? And they will tell you exactly why you should use it. Again, it's because the detergent levels lower, the wear properties in there, the additive package is correct for a break-in environment rather than a regular environment where you just need the right oil with the right amount of zinc in it and the right detergent package to keep the engine clean. So didn't mean to pick on you there, Tom. I hope you didn't take it that way, bud. But it was a good comment. I'm glad you threw it at me. Tool steel, no, but here's the thing: tool steel is very brittle. It is not the it's not the best material for every situation because it's a T7 tool steel cam core. Doesn't mean you could use it in a diesel truck or a small block Chevy. Well, you can, but it's for certain things. 8620, 5150, 5160, 1050 are all blends of steel that are used in cam cores and then cast, obviously, on the cast side. But tool steel doesn't mean the best of everything. So it's just it's application specific. Some things work really well with a tool steel cam. Some things you just don't. But I don't think you're going to see tool steel to replace a cast cam core anytime. I hope that always stays that way for you, Jason. You've gotten your spring pressures right and your alignment and everything on the lifter boards has been good. So I hope that always is the way. Yeah, the Billy is I wish I could have had him for 5 or 6 more hours. I'll run into him at PRI. I may try to do a follow-up interview with him next year to talk about some new stuff because he's always developing new load profiles and things like that. So maybe we can get him back on the channel and have another discussion with him. I think it'd be good for all of us because I'll learn something from it too. So let's see here. Yeah, as long as the crown on the lifter matches the taper on the cam. If he's one of those guys or she, I don't know who that is just grinding an OE crown on a lifter and not talking about the taper on the cam, run. Again, sorry, I'm just reading through your comments here, and I know I'm blowing past quite a bit of them, but so I apologize for that. I don't dislike AMSOIL. I run AMSOIL in my dirt bikes for years. Those engines run cooler in a air cooled or a water cooled dirt bike. I like the AMSOIL for that. Redline's getting more and more into automotive application stuff, and I've run Redline in my dirt bikes and street bikes and motards in the past, but I don't have any problem with AMSOIL. It seems to be okay. Yeah, so regarding the detergents, that's why I buy oil with zinc versus mono. Yeah, here's the thing. Like I said, when you take an off the shelf API oil, we talked about it earlier in the deal with the donut. When you add, what we didn't talk about is, and I think we talked about it in maybe it was the interview we did with Driven Racing Oil. I can't remember. At some point we talked about it. But if you buy an off-the-shelf detergent oil, that's what this is, and add a zinc additive to it, there's 2 problems with that. One, when a manufacturer goes to blend the base oil whether it's a synthetic, a semi-synthetic, or a conventional, dead dinosaur juice type of stuff, oil, and a additive package. The way those are blended, they are blended at a certain time and a certain temperature. So as the additive pack is added to the base oil, they may need to heat it up to a certain temperature, add in whatever part of the additive pack is going in there. That way, molecularly, it all bonds together. So when you take a detergent oil or any oil, 50 weight conventional oil you're going to use for break-in that's got no detergent in it, and throw a zinc additive in it, it doesn't mix instantly. It's got to get to that temperature point where the molecular properties of the zinc will bind to the base oil. Now, here's the other side of that. So when you throw a oil into an engine, and maybe it's a break-in oil, but you want to add more zinc to it, more zinc doesn't equal more protection. It actually means bad things happen. You can't throw that balance off. But when you throw a detergent oil and zinc in together, the detergent tries to wipe the zinc off of whatever it's on. It views it as something that needs to be cleaned. Detergent is a cleaner inside of an engine. So when you throw it, you may get a little bit of it that'll stick around, but the detergent is going to fight it, and you're going to wear out the additive package in the API oil faster by using a zinc additive. I know every manufacturer in the world has it, other than companies like Driven and other companies that make actual race type of oil. But I would never buy a zinc additive and add it to any API oil or add it to any oil that's already got the right amount of zinc for the formulation that they use. Don't play chemist. That's one of the things that Lake has always said in his talks is don't be a chemist. You don't know the temperature, the time, the order that it needs to go into. All of those things happen when you're talking about oil being mixed together. I think it was the Driven interview that we did. Maybe it was one at the Lake, but they explained that a little bit more in depth. But yeah, always buy an oil that's formulated for what you need. Let the chemistry of the oil work with what the application that you need. You don't take your application and then try to play chemist to make up what you need, because you don't know what the chemistry ends up being when you're using an additive and an oil. Again, it's time and heat, and you don't know what those are. So there's a lot of time before that zinc additive starts to work in an engine. And again, if you use a detergent oil, the detergent's trying to kill it off. So good question. I appreciate that one. I think the reason why, and it's a good question. I was asked that a while ago, and I was going to screenshot that for this as well, but I didn't. I think the reason would be that they could take and put on a Spintron and break in your cam for you and sell you a pre-broken in cam and lifter set. The problem is it would raise the cost so doggone high. It would be a couple $1,000s for that cam and lifter set, because the time on a Spintron and what they're designed for and do, they would have to charge an astronomically high price to get you a broken in cam. So it would be cool to, like Center Force, I'll use that as an example, the clutch company. They used to have a program. I don't know if they offer it anymore. I haven't talked to them in quite a while. But you could buy a clutch that was pre-broken in. Now, if you're a manual transmission guy, like I generally am for most of my junk, not having any break-in time on a clutch would be kind of cool. But for a small fee, they charge to do that, to break it in on their clutch dyno. They're the only manufacturer at the time that had a dyno where they could print out a chart to tell you what the actual torque rating was on a clutch. So, but they would break in a clutch for you. But that's the reason why you would never see a cam manufacturer do that. Just Spintrons are expensive. They're not expensive to run. They're just expensive to purchase, and the time on them when they could be testing other things, it would be a ridiculous amount of money. But I have asked that question before, and it is a good one. Thank you for that, Tom. Oh, I think I'm mostly caught up here. Oh, anyway, mostly anyway. So, where are we at here? Yeah, we're right at 2 hours. So, I didn't want to go much over that. I don't want to bore anybody, but a little shot to wet the whistle there. But I think I covered most everything I wanted to talk about. You guys all asked some awesome questions, so I definitely appreciate that. But zinc is an interesting thing when we talked about that. It's an anti-wear additive, but um, it's a boundary type lubricant, and it's designed to sacrifice itself. It's great, but again, playing chemist is just not a smart thing to do with it. And I did it before. It's not like I'm telling you this and I'm the smartest guy in the world. I learned that from talking to guys like Lake and the new um, tribologist over there at Driven now that Lake's gone, and learned, oops, I shouldn't be doing that. So spring pressures are big. Obviously, we talked quite a bit about that at the beginning. I still believe that and lifter bores are the reason why flat tappet cams fail. And that's not, you can't blame Howard's or Comp or Iskey or anybody or Clay Smith or whoever on that one. They can't control the pressures and they can't control the lifter bores. It's something that just has to be done locally. So, but I'm just trying to think of the other things I was going to talk about. Again, on when you talk about crown on a lifter, um, it has to match the cam. You can't have a. Oh, here's one that I had. We didn't talk about this in the lifter video. You can see how wide that chamfer is. The chamfer is the edge, and you don't want a lot of chamfer. When you have a big chamfer on a lifter, it doesn't have the same contact area on the lobe. That needs to be as wide as possible. And Comp, Crower, very, very good on their chamfers. This one happens to be the Summit brand one from the lifter video we did where we talked about that. If you want to watch those other videos, there's some really good info in there about all those other little details. I didn't want to talk about every detail that we covered in all those other videos. I wanted more to talk about the newer stuff, the DLC stuff, because it's now been almost a year since I did that video. And it's unbelievable how good that simple coating on a lifter has really changed um, change the game in that. So whoever asked that earlier about, will flat tappet cams go away? I don't think they will. Now, if you had asked me 2 years ago before I knew about that coating coming out, and now that it's been in play, I would have told you, yeah, there's a pretty good chance. Just have to bite the bullet. If you're going to be a engine guy or a car guy or girl, you're just going to have to go to roller, and that's what you're going to have to deal with. But the DLC is a bit of a game changer in that aspect. It could save that whole industry if it continues to work well. So, yes, they absolutely can. That's what a lot of the OE lifters have those problems. The needle bearings obviously can come out of there. They can have failure, but again, if you run too heavy of an oil, it's typically when that happens, or you use I know people do it all the time, but if you use like a factory LS7 style lifter on a really aggressive lobe camshaft and run a really heavy oil because you've got really loose tolerances on your bearings, you will wipe those lifters out pretty quickly. It's just as catastrophic as a flat tappet cam failure. So yeah, depends on what it is. I run the new Comp Evolution lifter in the GMC. It's the first time I've run it. I'm pretty happy with those. They're almost like a short travel lifter, but they're I think I did a video on the Evolution lifter, but it's a pretty cool deal. It's a cartridge style lifter, so it carries less oil inside of it, but it's a if it's a street engine, I have no problem, depending on what the cam profile is and the spring pressure um, is on the thing. But I run like the big block I'm putting together for the Chevelle. It'll be around an 800, 850 horse at the crank engine. I use a needle lifter on there all day long. I won't run a bushed one. They wear too quickly on a street engine. So race application, B&R is absolutely correctly. I would run that on a race motor all day long. I'd run bush just because they don't see thousands of miles. They see thousands of passes before they come apart. So, uh, 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 cool. I appreciate that, Con Mac. So, all right. Well, again, I'm sorry I blew past a bunch of your questions tonight. I just tried to get to stuff that, um, kind of fit in a little bit. And I know I blew past a ton of comments that you guys left, and I do apologize for that. If there's anything you want to talk about in the once this video is over with or this live's over with and it's uploaded to YouTube, if you want to ask me in the comments below, I'm happy to answer anything. But thank you guys for coming in tonight. Some of you all been here since the very beginning of the 2 hours B&R. Thank you for hanging around, dude. You all the questions you asked. It was awesome to help along with the conversation. I do appreciate that. But yeah, definitely check out the other videos that I did in the series. A lot of this stuff is goes into more depth. I'm going to shoot some images tonight, and as I'm under my heating blanket or something to make sure that I don't, not coming down with a cold or something tonight. I will post some of these images up on Instagram because some of the failures on these lifters is absolutely gnarly. But yeah, we had a number of these I showed in depth in the lifter video and all that, but took me ages to get all this stuff together. But super glad that I did because, again, I can talk about it, but if I'm just sitting in front of a camera giving you my opinion on everything, it doesn't mean anything. If I can show it to you, that is what I want to see when I watch a YouTube video or a Instagram reel or whatever on something. Show it to me. Don't tell me the theory behind it. Prove it to me. And again, it's why we spent all that time and money doing this to show the depth of the heat treat, on a camshaft. We talked this about in the second video we did, and cutting all these cams down and finding, ways to look at heat treating. This is off of a 5150 roller. You can see how thick it is on this one side and how thin it is over here on the other. Well, that's the ramp side of it. It needs to be heavier. It can be a little thinner over here, but that one's one that was questionable. And when we cut it apart, it was kind of cool to see it, that heat treat was something that would have failed eventually. So kind of cool to do that. I've seen it before, so it wasn't my idea to do this, but I wanted to give this to you instead of drawing a picture of something and go, this is what a heat treat could kind of look like. I wanted you to see it. I don't show me. I can't remember the phrase from Ronald Reagan, trust but verify, I guess it was. Trust me, but here's the verification when we talked about depth of heat treat and how these things all work together and how they failed and where these things failed, whether the lifter stopped rotating. It's obvious there. We know exactly the reason why that failed. It stopped rotating in there. Well, why did it stop rotating? Was it because the lifter bore was jacked up? It was too loose? It was ovaled? Whatever the case may be. So I've tried to make that the hallmark of this channel is I'm not going to sit here and whiteboard crap for you all day long. I'm going to show it to you. That way you'll know that there's some value in it and give you the opportunity to start questioning things in your builds and your engines and your carburetor tuning and whatever it is. But I will tell you that the last 5 years of really looking at this and the last 2 that took me to compile all this stuff together, I've learned a lot. And, I've been very fortunate to be able to have some really close relationships with Billy Godbold and Lake Speed and the folks at Driven and Comp. and be able to talk to them directly and ask some really pointed questions to learn the reasons why things happen and what we can do to help make it better. So it's been a big part of what I wanted to do on this channel, and I hope that you all are getting that value out of it. And I hope I'm providing that to you. I spent a lot of time and money to put all these videos together because, again, it was stuff that I wish somebody would have taught me 10, 20, 30 years ago. And I've got the opportunity to do it now. I got time to do it, and it's been a lot of fun. So, not a rant, it's more of a thank you. I appreciate you guys being here. So we'll take one last peek at the comments, and then I'll blow out of here. Yeah, I am definitely gonna get some zinc and vitamin C. I appreciate that. Thank you, Troy. You've been here since the beginning of this one too. I appreciate it. So yeah. Yeah. I will definitely definitely do that. So all right. Yeah, if you got any other questions or anything you want to leave in the comments, I'll answer them. Not tonight, but I'll get back on first thing in the morning. Again, I appreciate y'all being here, and you know, guys, share the hell out of these videos. I really appreciate that. The comments that you guys leave, the positive interaction, and even when you question me on things, it's good. We need to question each other. We need to ask good, solid questions and not things that kind of, you know, are attacking people. But if you don't believe me that something that I said is correct, force me to prove that. That's what a good engineer does. That's what a good, you know, engine builder, carburetor builder does. Some of the stuff I didn't do on purpose. I got tired of not knowing things on my own, and it just took the time to go out and learn it. So it's been a hell of a lot of fun, and I hope the videos next week from PRI are fun for you guys. Hope you enjoy those. And then I'm going to take probably a couple weeks off at Christmas time and unwind, and then we'll jump right back to the first of the year. I've got a ton of tuning videos that I need to do. I need to get the GMC back on track. Had some flex plate issues and some other little electrical issues that I've had to sort out, and I've been too lazy and it's been too cold to do it. But truck's finally in a good spot where I can get to a lift and get some work done. So next year I've got a lot of good content coming because, again, I want to show it to you instead of talking to you about theory. I want to show it to you so you can repeat it, or it gives validity to the things that I say. So not that other YouTubers that do that. I just prefer to deliver it that way because that's the way I would like it delivered to me when I'm watching stuff. So cool. Well, again, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me for a few hours, and you made my night go better. I feel a hell of a lot better than I did when I started this thing. So I thank you guys for that. But I'm gonna go ahead and bounce out of here, and I hope that was a good way to wrap up this topic. I know these videos are going to continue to get quite a bit of comments, and I try to answer everyone that I get notifications on. So that's never an issue. But I love this topic. I'm sorry that it's happening, but there's some things we can do to prevent it, and hopefully a couple of things in this video series and this tonight gave you some of those things to do that. So I will talk to you all later. I appreciate you guys. Look for the stuff on Instagram. I'll throw those pictures up sometime tonight. So, all right, we'll see you guys. Thanks for stopping by.